Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm the founder of Appnation. Some of you, I see some familiar faces, have been to my conference, which we had a couple weeks ago in New York. And I'm actually an old agency guy as well, so I'm going to put on my old agency hat. I'm dating myself a little bit here. I was at CKS Partners. For those of you who remember that, in 96 to 98, I was president and CEO of Atmosphere BBDO from 2000 to 2003 and launched the AKQA office in 2004 as the head of strategy. So I'm looking forward to having a good old-fashioned agency discussion, and I'm going to have everybody briefly introduce themselves so we can get right into the content. So we'll start right here.
Sure. My name is Chia, and I head up the creative and technology team for Ansible, which is Interpublic's mobile dedicated agency.
My name is Morgan Petty. I'm the Associate Director over at OMD's Airwave practice, which is their mobile group.
And you're heading up the New York office for mobile for
the New
OMD,
York office,
right?
the East Coast.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Chia.
Hi, my name is Chen, and I lead the DigitasLBi mobile practice in North America.
Great, let's jump right in. I always like to start off with kind of what's top of mind, you know? So you could have been Simon's presentation earlier, maybe you read an article, maybe you met an interesting company in the last day or two, but you know, as you go back to the office today, what's really top of mind for you as it relates to mobile and what's happening in the advertising and marketing space? G, we'll start with you.
Sure, not to put, from here on now, I'm going to refer to you as Chuck. Not to put him on the spot, but the biggest thing that's been happening for us the last few months is we are being better and more integrated with our digital counterparts, but it also means that it's we're working through kind of how to work together in the process. So I think you guys have all noticed it's kind of no longer a mobile and online world, or even on mobile, online, and offline world. Mobile by nature is cutting across multiple things, and that's the expectation of the strategy that comes out of mobile specialists. So a lot of overlapping, integrated, collaborative work being done, but it's also kind of just new that we're discovering as we go.
Great. Morgan, what's top of mind right now?
Definitely that. We have a lot of that as well. But I think also one of our largest challenges is trying to make sure we're staying top of mind for everything emerging. So anything that's new and interesting outside of just standard media, I think that's one of our largest challenges.
Right. Joe.
So I think one of the interesting things is just to kind of reflect a little bit on the other two panelists, what they've said is that mobile has kind of catalyzed a little bit of a revolution kind of in thinking about the customer, right, and how we reach it. And we've had these kind of siloed channel approach to the reaching customers, and I think what mobile is triggering is like, gee, you know, it's really, we're trying to reach people, not devices, right? And that's a big kind of realization as we think about kind of how we think about media investments and owned experiences and even social.
Absolutely. And I want to come back to the spend and where the money is flowing and how people can get it. I want to start a little bit top-line strategic. So we are in an iOS, Android world, and do you foresee that this is where we're going to be for the next 6-12 months? We have BlackBerry, we have Windows trying to stay in the game, but is it right now just about iOS and Android? Are you seeing any more traction in the last 6 months in terms of development and or media for either Windows, BlackBerry, particularly since the launches of their new devices and operating systems in the last 6 to 8 months? Anyone can jump in.
So, you know, I think what we see is certainly in the U.S., right? It's definitely dominated by iOS and Android. You know, and then from a sheer kind of like activity standpoint, it's really the iOS users who are probably the most engaged with their mobile devices in general. But on a global basis, that's different, right? So certainly in markets in Asia and in certain parts of Europe, South America, you know, BlackBerry is still a very, very big deal. And actually, with their new kind of operating system and new devices, they're making a comeback. So I think but you know, if you have a U.S. focus, certainly right now, like the big two are iOS and Android, but I don't know that we can discount the fact that there would be a pretty vital and vibrant third kind of alternative.
Anybody else?
I don't think we can ever assume that things will always stay the same, because we've seen that, in the last 2 years, the landscape's changed drastically. The other thing that we pay really close attention to is, yes, right now iOS and Android, to Chuck's point, dominate in North America and certainly have a huge presence or drive important trends across the world. But the function of kind of those two brands and how they go to market also skew the demo that's attached to them. So we try to be mindful of the fact that, as an example, I've seen so many slides that say, Apple users or iOS users, buy more, paid apps. Is that a function of the platform or the demo skew of iPhone owners, right? So we try to look at it that way forward, being kind of like to that point of being user and consumer centric, but we prepare for our world to change at any moment.
Yeah, I mean, to both of your points, I mean, I've seen studies that both say Android users are more engaged and iOS users are more engaged. I think they both, obviously app developers focus primarily on them, but I also have seen a bit of work coming out, developers doing work on Windows, and also BlackBerry. Also, BlackBerry's made a big play with some of their new handsets coming out, and I think that while a lot of us thought that BlackBerry was going to die, there are a lot of users who are just very attached to their BlackBerry devices.
Yeah, absolutely. And the global perspective is absolutely spot on. From more of the U.S. perspective, though, should we sort of follow? I agree with your advice about don't ever assume that the game is over, right? Because we see how fast things can change. People knock from the sort of app developer perspective, having been in this space for a few years. A lot of people knock Windows and BlackBerry now. Oh, well, if they pay you to develop the app, particularly if you're a larger company, then you might have your app on. But let's remember, when Android first came out, Google was paying the developers, and they were getting criticized heavily for, oh, well, yeah, sure, if you get paid by Google, you can develop an Android app and it'll be out there. So don't forget that Google was paying developers to develop apps for Android in the beginning as well. So I agree it can change, but are we seeing any specific, with people sort of dismissing at times Windows and BlackBerry, is it in the US specifically maybe a good time to take a second look, because these are still large audiences, right? And yes, we need to develop for iOS and Android and can be expensive and time consuming, but are there hidden gems of consumers out there in BlackBerry and sort of Windows land, if you will? Because it does come back to the consumer, it's not the device, right?
Absolutely.
So if your consumer is on Windows or BlackBerry for some reason in the US, there's no reason to not take a look, or, so where are we specifically in the US?
In the U.S., something really interesting is happening. To your point, there is, I don't underestimate Microsoft's ability to stay committed to a market they want to be a part of, not for a second. But more interestingly, you're pointing to something that's happening that we're seeing in not at large scale, but Android and Apple now are the new establishment.
Right.
So there's like a crop of anti-establishment-ish kind of desire that's popping up, especially in the developer community, that's actively looking for a second or third platform to kind of investigate and kind of grow their curiosity around. So we thought that was fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, no, certainly the developers, I would say, it's so saturated now. I mean, with 500,000 apps in each of the marketplaces, and you're going to try to develop an app, and it's incredibly, incredibly congested space. But have you seen any other movement, or are there pockets of particular consumer sets within Windows or the BlackBerry ecosystems here in the U.S. that merits your attention or merits anybody else's attention?
Well, honestly, like the fact that we're having this conversation, it points to an incredible kind of change, that's happening in terms of how brands kind of express, how brands think about expressing themselves, right? Because the fact that we're talking about what operating system, what platforms are really relevant for brands, right, is a big deal, and it kind of, and one of the things that well, if you take a little bit of a step back, I mean, the bigger kind of shift that's actually really happening here, and the operating system stuff is going to happen, and there's also kind of, you also think about like WebKit and, HTML5, that kind of stuff. But really, if you think about the big transformation here is about thinking about how do brands connect with consumers, right? So traditionally, brands have connected with consumers with words and images. But in the mobile era of digital, what that's really precipitated is this idea that the best way for brands to connect to consumers is to express themselves as software, right? That is a huge deal, because that makes you think about, what does the brand do, right? How, in what moment of need are you actually really meeting, versus, hey, is this the right brand color? And is this the right tagline I'm using? Those things are obviously still very important, but the fact that you have to think about, like, what is the manifestation of my brand as a piece of software, right? That's like the really kind of cool and fundamental shift, I think, that's really being brought about by the fact that, like Fleury's stat, about 80% of the engagement that people have on their smartphones is with apps. That tells you something. People prefer to interact with software.
Absolutely. Morgan, any thoughts on that? Whether it's Windows or BlackBerry, or even sort of what's happening in the emerging space broadly?
Yeah, I mean, I think also what it comes down to is that everybody has multiple devices. So what we're looking at is we have the opportunity to market to people at different times of their day. So obviously, a lot of businesses are still on BlackBerry, so that's a very interesting way to reach, B2B consumers, things like that. And then, reaching users at home with their tablets. It's hitting that same person in a more relevant environment, depending on their device.
So I want to continue with sort of this platform discussion before we get into media and spending. So, you brought up a good point, which brings in, okay, we just talked about iOS and Android and BlackBerry and Windows, and what about the mobile web, HTML5? So, where, in terms of client demand, or in terms of what you're recommending to your clients, is it, okay, you need to be on iOS and Android, you need to take a look at BlackBerry and Windows, and by the way, you also need a mobile website. So where are we in terms of, is it a mandatory minimum to have iOS, Android, and a mobile website, an HTML5 mobile website? And we talk about consumers. I agree with the Fleury stat that consumers are putting their hands up and saying, we like apps, despite the potential of HTML5 from a technology standpoint, right, and a capability standpoint. Where are we with the mobile web? And is it sort of, de rigueur to have iOS, Android, and mobile web from a development as a touch point? And then we can also talk about the media side.
I mean, the mobile web has been advancing faster than the app environment has. I mean, I think we underutilize the capabilities of the mobile web today, and agencies, certainly, we are responsible for part of that. We treat it still as kind of this platform where, very advanced capabilities, interactive capabilities, or animation, or anything like that is not possible. And we've demonstrated that's entirely untrue. Intel's last campaign was because, they found out it's not cool to advertise Ultrabooks on iAds. They pushed a really, really advanced game that was ported for Xbox and online onto tablets and phones using essentially 80% of the same code base, right? That is, I don't think most people realize that that's possible. Having said that, we talk about this a lot, and I can't believe we're still talking about this, but the web and app environments, the software environments, both have their roles, very specific roles. Until kind of things, environments and kind of structures, requirements change, the web is, whether it's mobile or not, is where you begin by casting a wide net and making people, and kind of your awareness kind of net. Once you draw them in and people have raised their hand and said, I'm interested, or I like this brand, then you earn the right to live perpetually on their devices, right? So if you kind of know what you're going for, it's much easier to make decisions outside of the capabilities that the technology offers.
Morgan, from a media perspective, are you seeing that you recommend to almost all clients, or does it come back to the brand and who the consumer is, that if you're spending on mobile from an advertising standpoint, that it should be iOS, Android, and some mobile web spending? Is it always all three? Is mobile web sometimes in it, or does it really come down to the brand and the audience that they're going after?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I definitely always recommend mobile web. And making sure they have a mobile web destination that's very strong. But it also depends on the objective. Obviously, depending if you're interested in something that people haven't necessarily heard of, mobile web might be a little bit better. And if you're working with an already engaged environment, apps might even be something that's more appropriate.
And Chia, same thing, same question in terms of the balance of, is there sort of an automatic recommendation, minimum places you have to be, or is it, does it really come down to the brand and the audience?
We only recommend video. No, actually, yeah. So it does balance itself out. I think to the point that the other panelists were making earlier. I mean, it's definitely around kind of like who you're trying to reach and what's the purpose, right? Certain clients, it's really more about just kind of broad, general kind of reach plays. Then you definitely want to have like a bigger component, maybe be about mobile web, because to your point, it is more kind of the general purpose. Like, hey, I'm going to ping this website for a specific need, right? So for a need I'm not going to repeat a lot, right? So, but when you have more of a relationship with that brand, then you're probably going to go towards something like an app. So,
and the other thing that's kind of a pet peeve for me is when there are multiple brands that belong to one app without a clear purpose why they're separate, right? So if there's a new thing, a new seasonal push, a new theme, think of your app environment as your depth channel. Add to it, make it more vibrant, extend from that. Don't create a whole new environment where you now have to direct your existing audience and your fan base to.
In regards to, let's dive into the media part just a little bit, and sort of where is the money flowing from, right? So if I'm a sell-side vendor, if I'm a publisher, and I'm looking for ad dollars, obviously we know they live certainly in the media services agencies, but does it pay to also tap the creative and the strategy directors? When you're fighting for dollars internally, right, for a campaign, for one, where is it coming from? Is it mobile dedicated budgets? Is it coming out of a broader digital budget? Are you actually, if it's a mobile sort of local initiative, are you actually trying to get it out of print?
Cage match.
But where's the money coming from? And if people are pitching you to get more dollars, where is it easiest to get money from internally?
Wow. So internally, it's easiest to get money from the declining non-digital budgets, right? Media. So like terrestrial radio. Anybody here working there? Okay, so and print.
You can say it. It's
yeah.
It's all right.
No, I just but it's a little bit. I guess it's unfortunate for those publishers, but that's kind of like where that money is coming from. It's definitely I think what we're seeing is it's not that we're kind of like carving out like invading the digital budget. It's for us what we see. It's more of an incremental kind of like what we think it's all going digital like one day. So let's like we don't know what terrestrial radio is doing for us anymore. Let's figure out what to do with that, and certainly. Local is a big part of what mobile can do. That's kind of interesting. And then, print is the same thing.
OMD's perspective on...
Yeah, I was going to say I completely agree. I mean, I think the greatest part about the spot that we're in is that we have that opportunity to pull budget from all these different places. So, I mean, I feel like for the most part we do have dedicated budgets, but then, we'll get something from radio where they say, we'd really like some digital radio, some video is obviously huge. And those budgets come from TV and they come from radio. And also, like you said, the creative shops and all that, like if we want to develop an app together, if we want to do a really interesting game and port it over to mobile, those budgets can come from there as well. So I think it's a really interesting place because of that.
I mean, mobile is driving a lot of, the practice itself is driving a lot of really great integration inside big agencies. And it kind of like, I think you're seeing a shift based on what we're all saying, where we are able to go in and talk about, well, okay, if your goal is purchase drivers or in-store traffic, there's kind of a flow of planning that we integrate mobile dollars from. And then there's a second layer that's happening, pointing back to the emerging piece, that's about net new. What are net new things that we were not able to do ever before, but are now able to do because of mobile, and that's actually opening up new money, right? So it's, and that is kind of now the territory that I touch on a lot because it opens up opportunities to, for example, create custom creative experiences in partnership with our media partners. So it's very exciting kind of like how this practice is pulling in from a lot of different places that weren't talking to each other before.
And that sort of, you're touching on native a little bit, and that sort of opens up a discussion of, where are we at the show 2 weeks ago, at my show, Grace Liao, who heads up platform and analytics at Viviki, said, well, what do you, if you have to boil it down, the motto Richie Glassberg said, what do you need right now? And she said, standards, standards, standards. And then that set off a debate over a day and a half, and David Cohen from UM came up, and Amanda Richmond from Starcom came up, and they said, it's standards, standards, standards. Where are we, and this goes back, we all did this sort of 15 years ago, right, in terms of online
Well, I wasn't,
and the internet. Well,
of age 15 years ago.
I'm going to leave that alone, Chuck. Where are we in this push and pull? And not surprisingly, all the buy-siders that were on stage a couple weeks ago kind of said standards, 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 and all the sell-side said, no, we want more time to innovate product. And I say product, I mean ad inventory, whether it's native or all these emerging devices are coming up. And there was a push from the buy side to the MMA and the IAB, standards, standards, standards now. And there's a push from the sell side said, no, not yet. Doesn't mean we can't have working committees. It doesn't mean that maybe with smartphone display specifically, maybe we are down to 5 or 6 sort of standards in terms of the display, and we can start to work on a sort of agreed upon standard there. But where are we in terms of standards versus innovation from an ad inventory standpoint on mobile devices specifically? And that's open to anybody. Are you want more standards now? And we know standards leads to scale, and scale leads to more money. But is it time to, curtail innovation a little bit and say, you know what, let's agree on some standards?
It's both. So I think it's flipped the way you had it. When we have partners coming to us talking about reach and scale, right? We have the largest network, we have the breadth of inventory. I want standards. That is an efficiency layer. We all need it.
And we just saw Facebook go from whatever 27
Correct.
to 7
Yeah.
forms of advertisements.
Correct. You can't, if you're in the business of delivering scale and efficiency, standards are a requirement. Work with other partners in the same category, make the buying process easier for us. If you're in the business of innovation, so you're coming to us and saying, I got something nobody else has, you get a bit of a pass until you want that scale. We want big dollars. How can we be the lead in your planning? Well, you're now in a different category.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So yeah, no, for us, I think it's pretty much the same in the sense that, we think that there are some standards now. Unfortunately, there's standards that kind of trap us in a small rectangle kind of place of
Right.
of creative, which as a creative agency, it's like small rectangles, not super excited about that. So I think we're very much kind of on the sense of in the camp of we get that there needs to be some baseline set of standards for stuff that you can buy that reaches tens of millions of users and so on, but we also want to explore ways to really innovate and create kind of these experiences that really address kind of key moments in our consumers' kind of journey, right? So that is I think right now we've got some standards. I think we're comfortable with kind of moving forward, but understanding that there is some incremental effort involved, right? Because of this unsettledness and around some of the more innovative kind of placements. But we're willing to live with that if it does allow us kind of interesting creative opportunities and opportunities to create new experiences.
And Morgan, from OMD's standpoint, when people are and you're looking at budget, is it do you default? Obviously, it comes down to the brand and the reach and to what you're talking about, but where are you in regards to standards and the feeling at OMD and that push and pull between wanting more standards and being open to more innovation?
I mean, I've never experienced it being kind of a problem before. I feel like we were also able in mobile to kind of piggyback on the creative sizes that we are able to use in traditional digital display and kind of, always make sure that we can pare those down. And I think that was kind of an easy way for us to get into standard reach for mobile and also use any of the more creative units that we were able to see on desktop and kind of duplicate that as well. Or even, I know there's a huge debate saying that, well, mobile is a completely different platform and we should be treating it differently, which I completely agree with. But with clients that are sometimes, you have to really ease them into it, being able to port those experiences over can kind of lead that charge for them.
And Chia, at lunch you were having a discussion about metrics and data and everything. So if we talk about all these different platforms, right, delivering, whether it's a fairly scalable with a lot of standards it's delivering, but then all these native and custom solutions, you got all this data and all these results coming in, whether it's consumer data, whether it's analytical data about the performance of campaigns. How are you guys managing all of this data that's coming in, whether it's about performance of campaigns, your customers and their behavior, or both? Are you working with vendors in terms of doing this? Are you doing a lot internally, hiring people internally to do it? But how are you, I hate the term big data. We had a session a couple weeks ago called Big Data is Dead, Long Live Smart Data. But in this big data discussion, how are you managing it internally in terms of all this input?
So very quickly, we have a great team of folks, and we are creating some proprietary platforms and working with partners in other aspects. But I think to your point though about kind of the smart versus big data stuff, there is absolutely a lot of data. The frustrating part is that it's not the right data.
Right.
So what we want to be able to do is to be able to have a holistic attribution model, right, across at least all the digital channels for the outcomes that the advertising produces, but we don't, not really, right? So we're kind of cobbling it together, and we're doing probabilistic stuff, but we really want to be able to get to a point where we're able to say with certainty, mobile accounted for X% of the outcomes here, and desktop accounted for Y%, and so on. So that's kind of the issue we're trying to solve for now.
Yeah, I mean, we have been more and more working with some of our closer partners and requiring data to be fed in a certain way. Where that's not possible, we resort to raw data. So imagine how much work goes into our poor team as the budgets grow to try to take this disparate, even different partners call the same actions differently, right? So to take that and try to standardize what we're trying to derive across all of the different buys, there's a lot of effort happening right now. I would say our kind of like approach to it is, I'm not doing this justice, but like a Band-Aid approach, right? So there are pieces that we expect our larger partners, infrastructure partners to solve for us. It should not be our job to fix tracking and analytics for the mobile industry, but we certainly are building pieces on top of it that clean the fundamental raw data that's coming in.
Great. So I want to get to, if you have a question, go to the mic now, because I at least want to get to one question. Let me get to something real tactical from a monetization standpoint before we leave. What is working? So this could be very specific. You could say, pre-roll video on tablets is really working for us. So from a monetization sort of ad inventory format perspective, it could be an email, it could be mobile search, it could be very simple, or it could be something very custom and native. But give us something that, is resonating with you when someone says, I have this sort of form of inventory. What's working?
Precision is working for us. So give us more precision. So that's the whole hype around local. Local is one lever in precision. Give me purchase history. Give me behavioral history. Give me everything that gets me to
So it's not as
precision.
much about multimedia or something sexy and interesting. It does come back to the audience. Yeah?
Precision, yeah. But cross-channel being part of that.
Absolutely.
In terms of ad units, I would say interstitials. I think they present an extremely interesting opportunity where you don't have to have the user do an initial action before you can get a full screen opportunity in front of them. Sometimes there's not enough banner space and then they're not interested in clicking. I think it's a really unique opportunity.
Native works. It really does.
One other tactical question which someone asked me to answer. So mobile search is increasingly hugely important in my opinion. And if you have a paid search and someone is clicking on that link, is it your recommendation that they land at a mobile web page, an HTML5 web page, or do they land at a landing page that directs you or suggests, like Yelp, download our app now, like it sniffs you out, download our app? But where, from a mobile search perspective, where should that link direct consumers? And again, this could come back to the audience and the consumer, of course, but is there sort of a standard rule that's emerging in terms of where mobile search links should lead?
Look, there's no standard rule. There is a perception that search in general is the close to last click. So you feasibly could drive them to an app download page, but there isn't a clear kind of blanket rule for it.
Yeah.
It does tend to be kind of the last place people click after doing some research.
Right.
But consumers like choices, so.
Sure. Any other thoughts then?
I mean, I definitely think that every mobile search click should go to a mobile optimized page. And I think that while a lot of us in this room think that that's a given, it's rather uncommon.
And it depends. I think actually, so Google allows you to actually give you go to the landing page or get an app download, and for certain clients who have like assets like an app and and a robust kind of mobile optimized website, that works. So it's really dependent on what the brand is trying to accomplish and what assets it's actually created, right? So.
Yeah. Do I have time for audience? One question. If you could introduce yourself as well.
Joe Spector from Reverb, and we have an app that basically can get a lot of precision data back to the agency or the publisher, but one of the kind of issues we face is the vast majority of mobile ads are advertising games at the end of the day. And it's like we can talk about brands dipping their feet into the mobile waters, but from what we see, it's like 70%, or I mean, it's vast majority download this latest game that just got a ton of VC money, and they're spending it to try to get high up in the US App Store. Mm-hmm. And my question is, from your perspective, it seems like you're convincing brands to get into mobile, and I feel like I've heard of that for a while, but when do you actually see them, and what do you think it's going to take for them to really, truly start shifting that budget into mobile?
I mean, from where we sit, that's actually already happening, but it's coming the other way. So it's coming from kind of traditional kind of planning, buying kind of approaches to a more better digital savvy across the board, to higher responsibilities for mobile as part of that push. So it's not so much coming in from like mobile app downloads or mobile drive to and more of that. It's kind of holistically up to down. So I think it's a little bit different than what you're saying.
So I think the answer actually is, like, why is it that game companies are dominating mobile advertising? It's because they know the ROI. Mm-hmm. They know that every one of those game developers know exactly what the lifetime value of a download is, right? And they can actually track back to the placement. When we're able to do performance marketing in mobile for across a number of categories for clients, that is when you're going to unlock that kind of that spend, right? Because the brand spend a lot of it is already there, but like the performance marketing budgets are like that's the next big wave.
I mean, I think to that point, I mean, the new internet studies that just came out, I mean, over 60% of the time spent in mobile is casual gaming or gaming.
Yeah.
So
not me. I'm working.
Yeah, and as we close, just for perspective, remember we talk about the impact of mobile, but you still only just now have half of Americans have smartphones, and barely 25% have tablets. So 40 billion app downloads in the Apple Store in just over 4 years. So the perspective here is warranted as well. Where we're going to be in even 2-3 years from now is pretty exciting. So I wish we had a little more time, but a big round of applause for our panelists here.